with 6 people.
Are we, Todd, we good? Okay, I can barely see. Yep. Good morning and welcome to the January 15, 2025 Finance Committee meeting. Unfortunately, I'm the only committee member currently here. We have other board members here, but I will not be able to take a vote on the agenda or the approval of the November minutes. So we're going to jump right down to number 4 on our agenda, Goal 4. And have a couple updates and discussions. The first being House Bill 581. Mr. Jackson is going to be presenting that.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to jump right on into this and try to run through it. What is Georgia House Bill 581? The bill was created in response to concerns from the Georgia legislature about increasing property values and property taxes. The floating homestead exemption goal is to control assessments of properties by freezing property values. The property tax reform House Bill 581 was signed into law on April 18, 2024, and was voted on by the voters last November. Major components. The bill provides relief and clarity to taxpayers by offering the following: a statewide floating exemption, an optional sales tax to further offset taxes, and property tax process reforms. How does the floating exemption work? The exemption basically has 2 parts. First, it increases the value of the exemption to offset inflation as illustrated in the example below. For example, if a property has a taxable value of $100,000 and the value is increased by $10,000, then the exemption floats to be worth $10,000 of the taxable value. The second part of that, it allows for the base year to be adjusted by the rate of inflation. On that same $100,000 property value, base value, it uses a CPI or some other type of inflationary rate that the state has not decided yet to increase the base value by that inflationary rate. For example, the base value of a $100,000 house may be increased by 2%, given the adjusted base value increased to $102,000. The floating exemption floats to be worth $8,000 instead of the $10,000 in the previous example. That way, the taxpayer will pay taxes on a $102,000 house instead of the $110,000 house that the house is appraised at. Does Chatham County already have a floating exemption? Yes. The largest exemption in Chatham County is called the Stevens Day Homestead Exemption. After area politicians Ron Stevens and Burke Day, who sponsored the law into state legislation in 1998. The Stevens Day bill allows homeowners to freeze property taxes based upon their current purchase price, but only for their primary residence. It was proposed to prevent homeowners from being taxed out of their homes when property values went up. The legislation saved many local residents hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year. Their legislation became the framework for other counties and eventually this statewide legislation. What are the common goals of both exemptions? Both exemptions are designed to provide the same savings to taxpayers by providing some property tax relief by offsetting rising property taxes and providing long-term affordability. In comparison, the only differences so far that we see, House Bill 581 allows the exemption on all homestead properties. Stevens Day only allows exemptions on properties smaller than 5 acres. However, from a conversation that we got, that we had with our tax assessor and tax commissioner, the state actually considered this an oversight on their legislation, and they plan to go back and update their legislation to change it to its only properties that are less than 5 acres. So they're going to change theirs so it won't be all of the property values. It would only include properties that are less than 5 acres. The other difference is we're not sure what the state is going to use for their rate of inflation. Currently, Stevens Day used CPI, but the state haven't given us any indication on what they're going to use, even though they're asking school districts, city, and county governments to make a decision on whether to opt in and out or out, but they haven't given us the basis for their rate of inflation. The other difference is House Bill 581, again, is a statewide exemption. Stevens Day is just designed for Chatham County residents. Everything else is pretty much the same, except for 581 allows, again, districts, city and county governments the option to opt out and stay status quo, or from presentations from the GSBA, who actually encourages local governments to, if they're going to opt out, to try to establish their own local laws that is similar to this legislation. And the other difference is for those governments that decide to opt in, they have the option to do a 1% sales tax, similar to East Blocks, to make up for the lost revenue of opting in. Frequently asked questions. Just like Stevens Day, the base value would be adjusted for home additions or reset if the property is sold to the next taxpayer. How would it impact the school district? There could be some disruptions for school districts and other government agencies because of the uncertainty of the year-to-year rate of inflation. For most school districts, it would limit their local revenue and lower their state QBE revenue because it would not adjust their local 5 meals when it's calculated by the state. The exemptions are not new. Again, Chatham County currently has Stevens Day, but Chatham County also has some other special exemptions where residents can also apply for and be eligible for, which, for example, the senior school tax disability, a special Chatham County tax, and an exemption for disabled veterans. Concerns. QBE funding, again, is not adjusted by the rate of inflation. And this is where most counties, especially small counties, would have a problem. For most districts, again, it will lower their local revenue and possibly lower their state revenue, their state QBE revenue. Most districts fully leverage state and funding federal sources, which in many ways are limited to a very prescribed condition in place of the expenditure of those funds. For example, Title I and special ed. State funds provide a very basic foundational education, a quality education, basic education. With the limitations of House Bill 581 were put in place, the value revenue resources that fund local innovations could be impacted, including positions that are not fully funded by the state. Compensation increases, varied electives, and unique programs by students. Other concerns. The floating tax component would have a negative impact on future East Plus referendums. Governments only have one time to opt out, and that is by March 1st. But one of the biggest concerns is the future changes to the law by legislators. Key considerations. Key items that we want the citizens of Chatham County to remember. The existing 2001 Stevens Day exemption accomplishes the same intent of House Bill 581. Our current budget process provides flexibility to address community needs, adjust budgets responsibly, and preserve an open dialogue with stakeholders. The district has the option to modify the millage rate if economic and financial position creates conditions for a rollback. Decisions over exemptions and the millage rate should remain a local decision. House Bill 581 provides a means for taxpayer relief to those districts that do not have a current exemption, similar to Stevens Day. The opt-out provides a fair process and serves jurisdictions where exemptions already exist. The law has opt-out provisions and timelines for city, counties, and school districts to opt out and submit information to the state, again by March 1st. The process is similar to what we do for millage rate hearings. We have to advertise it in the paper, have 3 public hearings, then the board has to take action by vote. At this time, I will open the floor for questions that we may or may not be able to answer, but we're working with our tax assessor and tax commissioner and people at the Georgia Department of Education to get further information. But from what we're being told so far, especially from the tax assessor's office, it's going to be their responsibility to make all of this happen, there's not too much difference between Stevens Day and 581, other than the additional ability for a school district to create an additional sales tax to make up for that lost revenue. And the current limitation on the 5 acres, but again, according to people from the Georgia Department of Revenue, that may change in the next legislature, if not this legislation.
I got you, Connie. Go on ahead.
Mr. Jackson, that additional 1%, it wouldn't have the restrictions that our East Blast has on us, would it? It would just be open for general fund or
General
anything?
operations. Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
our
All right.
understanding.
Okay.
It would be open for general operations.
Well, just on first hearing, I don't see any positive reason for us to do this. Does anybody, am I missing something? And maybe if we could get Ms. Jackson or somebody someone to come and when it gets further
And-
clarified.
Yes, ma'am.
But right now, to me, we're doing great.
I think that's where most of us are, Ms. Hall. I'm just asking, is the intent of the district to schedule these 3 hearings?
Yes.
That's where we won't, we as a board cannot vote to say, yes, please have these public hearings. Y'all have to schedule them, we'll come. We would be then discussing and then having a final vote on that 19th if that's the intent of the district to move this forward on an opt-out procedure, correct?
That is accurate. My understanding, though, is that I would have to, with the posting in the newspaper, post our intent as a district prior to getting feedback in the 3 hearings, which to me is a little out of order.
That is interesting, yes.
But it is my understanding that I have to confirm what our intent is. So my recommendation will be public-facing before we get to hear public input on it. That is not my preferred methodology.
Yeah, I can
That is
understand.
what-
It's the intent of the district to do a lot of stuff before y'all bring it in front of us
Right.
and in front of the public, so understandable. Run with that intent, and then we'll have the public hearings, and then we'll vote on the 19th if all of these meetings are amenable. Yeah, I don't know if all of us will be able to make every single one of them just because they're scheduled at a short notice, but this was a short notice brought upon by the state as well, so Any other comment from, yes, Dr. Howard Hall?
Yes, when we first heard this at the GSBA training in December, it was just really mind-blowing. And it was like you was between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
Because if you have until March 1st to opt out, and you only get one chance to do it.
Right.
And then if you decide to keep it, you have to consider 1% sales tax, which is another whole,
Yeah,
problem to be faced
Indeed.
with regarding this funding. So we were caught off guard. I mean, I won't say I was at the GSPA meeting to hear this in the short timeline that we have to make the decision. So it doesn't sound too positive to me when you look at all of the considerations, being that we do have Stevens Day and our constituents do have the opportunity to have the taxes, free. So
Exactly.
we'll see.
Yes, Ms. Hall?
But that's always a problem if the constituents don't really understand it and they come to these hearings they're supposed to be ready to give an opinion. It just seems to me it's just going to be chaos.
Yeah, and that is the goal, of not only the school district, but the city of Savannah and Chatham County. We're all basically are going to be preaching the same sermon per se, to make sure citizens understand that they currently have the same benefits of House Bill 581. So they, from what I'm hearing, they plan on opting out as well. So we're all going to be doing the same thing.
We need to understand, too, that it's for the whole state, and not everybody in the state currently has Stevens Day. So this is allowing, actually, they already have it now. Their county actually has to do a bunch of work to not have it.
Correct.
And that 1%, while it sounds good for us, I think there are some, and this literally just popped, I think there are some areas that they might go to the voters for something like a SPLOST to help their school district, and it doesn't pass. Well, now this allows them just to have that. So I think, it's probably looked at the broader Georgia versus counties that have had Stevens Day and have been having these exemptions for a long time.
Well, who do we consider the experts? I would say the tax assessor's office.
Yes.
Let them be we don't need 10 different
Indeed.
messengers. But I don't see anything wonderful for us in this.
And we do plan to meet with them, hopefully before the end of this week, to see if there was any additional information they gathered from the meeting they had in, I think it was Macon the other day. But that is a good point, just to get all the local governmental bodies together and figure out, okay, let's do one message to everyone.
No, I had read, and I forgot which district it was, but one district was able to tabulate how much money they would lose. Have we been able to do that?
No, because districts like that don't currently have a Stevens Day type of
got it.
exemption. So for them, they need to do something like that so they can convince taxpayers it would hurt them. But districts that already have this type of Stevens Day type of exemptions, I'm not going to say it's nothing to calculate unless we know what the state is going to use for their rate of inflation. And they haven't told us that yet. That would have been helpful, but we haven't received that number yet. But we're assuming, based upon comments from our tax assessor and those that went to the meeting, it's probably going to be CPI, but you never know with the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir.
We will move on to enrollment projections with Ms. Cooley.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'm going to go over our projected enrollment for the next fiscal year in fiscal year 2006. Public school enrollment trends in the U.S. have been on the decline since 2019. Obviously, the pandemic was the major thing that happened there, but that wasn't the only thing going on. Before the pandemic, there was already a decline in birth rates in the United States as well as Georgia. So from 2012 to 2019, enrollment was going up slightly in the United States each year, and then when COVID hit, enrollment dropped about 3%. It remained flat in 2021. 2022, it rebounded slightly, and then in 2023, enrollment dropped further, and we are projecting the United States decline to be about 5% from 2024 through 2031. Public school enrollment trends in Georgia. Public school enrollment in Georgia has been declining, while the charter school enrollment has been increasing. Nationally, public school enrollment is also projected to decrease between 2024 and 2031. This is due to the projected decline in the school-age population. Charter schools are the only segment of public education that has seen consistent growth, adding more than 80,000 new students in the 2023-2024 year. Our enrollment process. On our enrollment process, we forecast based on past and current patterns of change. So what we do with our district is the budget office goes and we put in all the numbers, we look at our historical data, and then we come out with, we also factor into there our census, state and local data, our population growth. We look at how many children were born 5 years ago so that we know what we're looking at coming up with the kindergarten age children. We put those trends in, come up with our statistical analysis from it, and then we also in the budget office kind of look at it ourselves. And then the next thing we do is we send out all this data to the principals of every school. They know information that we don't. Maybe there's a new apartment complex being built next door to a school site that isn't on our radar, and they let us know about that. So if we need to adjust. So we go through all those different things, and we get that information back from the principals. In our enrollment, part of our regular enrollment, we are not including pre-K or self-contained special ed students in that, and you'll see that. I will point that out in several of the graphs that are coming up. The next phase after we've talked to all the principals, which I'm sure they get their school site people involved in that too, anyone they think would be helpful, is then we sit down and the budget office gets together with academic affairs personnel, which is the top people in there, as well as their coordinators and stuff, anybody that can be helpful to us. We also have operations involved. They come in there because they know how they're redistricting and moving people around. And then we also have technology, the people that do the FTE for the district. So we sat down and we went through school by school and to come up with our final numbers for enrollment. It was a very group process. It's not just based on one person's opinion or one department's opinion. It's a school, we vetted it through a lot of different aspects in our school district. So that's our process here at SCCPSS. Our enrollment patterns. The district revenue is based on our enrollment. The expenditures have continued to rise, mainly because of our salaries and benefits. Compensation has gone up. We have continued to lose children due to the fall of birth rate in Georgia, which is a nationwide problem. Our numbers this year went down a little bit. We were at 35,543 students. We were the year before in 2024, fiscal year 24. This year we were at 35,428. So we did go down a little bit even this year. Even with all the growth of going on, with everything that's going on with Hyundai, we haven't seen those jumps yet. We're hoping for the future. We obviously want to keep growing in size. The The district enrollment is influenced by a number of students who choose an alternative to public schools. There's private schools, charter schools, home schools, virtual schools. And Chatham County's total population has increased, but our enrollment has not. One thing is, this is an aging community in Chatham County. A lot of retirees love this area and move into it. Those retirees don't typically have school-age children, so that's one of the things that's going on. I did want to also point out, besides these factors, we also have now a new Georgia Promise Scholarship Program for private schools and for homeschooling, where hundreds of students in Georgia will be eligible for a $6,500 voucher to pay private school tuition or homeschool expenses. And we don't exactly know how this is going to affect us. I don't think it will be a tremendous change for next year, but it could be in the future as new schools come up, and there may be areas where they start a new school. A church could start a new school, because right now, $6,500 doesn't come close to covering private schools in our area, not the typical. But we don't know what could happen in the future or what kind of things could be developed. So that is another thing that we need to think about, that is going to take money away from the public school system, because the money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to be available to those students to choose, that could choose to use the $6,500 towards private school or homeschooling. On this slide right here, I'm showing a 10-year birth rate, and this is from 2014 through 2023, our birth rate. And the one that we're looking at now for our kindergarten students is in 2020, and as you can see, that year was a pretty low one, 3,510, and that's been on a decline. So we can probably assume that our kindergarten numbers are not going to go up next year. On this next slide, we show the 5-year regular enrollment for grades 1 through 5. The blue line shows what we projected each year, and the orange line shows how much we actually had. We did have a little bit more in grades 1 through 5 this year on our 10th day than we projected. We did show a slight increase in that number for next year. On this slide, it is the 5-year regular enrollment for grades 6 through 8. As you can see from the blue, that's our projections. We've been a little high, and then the actuals. That one we've also projected an increase, and I'm going to kind of talk about that at the very end, why we did do this little bit of an increase, even though it is showing that we've been going down a little bit. And then this next slide is our 5-year enrollment summary for grades 9 through 12. The blue line, dotted line is our projections, and the the orange line is our actuals. We have shown a slight decrease in grades 9 through 12 for next year. So as a whole, our total enrollment, all of those previous slides did not include pre-K and self-contained special ed. This slide is the total enrollment, which does include the pre-K and special ed. We have projected a 100 enrollment increase. The reason we did that, even though it sounds counterintuitive, we have a huge vacancy factor with a bunch of teacher positions available that we have not been able to fill. When the district decides to decrease enrollment, that means schools have to let go teachers, lose teachers. Well, we have not been able to fill all the teacher positions, so we don't want to hurt the schools by going and reducing it. So we're trying to remain, that's not a big increase. I'm not so sure. I'm hoping that maybe we will with the new industry coming in. I'm not so sure we will, but I know there's no way we're going to have enough teachers anyway. So I'm not going to hurt the schools, because then that doesn't allow them to keep the teachers they have, because if their enrollment's going down, they have to go, oh, well, I've lost a teacher position. So we're trying not to do anything like that because we certainly don't want to lose any teachers. So that is why, even though we may go down, I don't think we will go down by a significant number. As you saw last time, it was like 50 people or 50 students. We were that close in our projection. But even though everything shows against this, when we all met, I started out where I made it come back to 100 less, because I was trying to give everybody at least 100 to build up to, but it was so hard to cut these schools, and we tried to do it in every way possible not to cut a teacher, if possible by even allowing certain grades to go up a little bit more. If it was going to lose a teacher, if 2 students was going to make up, we'd let them move some of that enrollment into the grade. So this is, I don't believe we would ever have a problem with too many teachers. And I certainly do not want to harm the schools by making them get rid of the staff they currently have, which enrollment does. It tells them how much they earn. So for that reason, after speaking with everyone, and we felt this was the best case scenario, not to overstaff, because I know at the same time we have a fine line. When we get to 10th day next year, we don't want people to be way overstaffed, because then they have to be moved, and that causes chaos too. But we felt like this is not a significant number. It was our best way not to harm schools, let them try to keep the staff as much as possible, and yet at the same time, not have chaos on 10th day because of a huge loss of teachers to a school that doesn't meet the requirements for that. So this was group effort, and I believe this is the best way to do that.
I'm gonna pause you right there. I, not the board, I fully support that. Okay, and thank you for feeling like you needed to really sell it to us. I speak for myself. Let's do right by our teachers. Let's do right by our school administration. Let's do right by our students. Enrollment is one thing. The projection is really what's important. You trying to figure out exactly what our FTE is so we can figure out that budget, and continually moving that around to ensure we are as staffed as well as we can. And yeah, if it goes down a little bit and we have a smaller class size, I don't think many of us are going to complain about that as well, if we're working other areas of the budget that don't directly impact our staff and the learning environment. So that's Brinkman, that's not the board, and that's not this committee, that's just me. But I say thank you to everybody that's in that process, because I think when I see this, I really could care less about what our enrollment numbers are. I think it's interesting that schools, even higher ed, it's like we always have to be growing enrollment. Enrollment's got to go up. And if enrollment goes down a little bit, that's fine. Now, if the birth rate was out in the stratosphere of thousands upon thousands of children being born and our enrollment was going down, then we have to have a big talk. They're not coming here and there's lots of them. But if it's all trending down, okay, let's just do what you're doing and project as good as possible to ensure that our budget meets the needs of our staff and students. So that's Brinkman. What do we have, Ms. Hall?
I totally agree with you, and it makes me very proud to feel that our board will probably be united in that consensus. Thank you so much. I do wonder, are charter schools losing teachers? What are they going to do if they're getting 72,000 new students? Who's teaching those kids? Where are they getting their teachers, and how are they getting them? Are they paying them? What's the formula?
Well, charter schools can pay more if they want to. One of the charter schools, I have no idea what they pay because they don't do their payroll through us. The other 4 do, and they tend to be on ours, but they sometimes pay certain jobs. That's the thing about being a charter school, is you can choose to do that. If you're having a shortage, you can choose to pay more than what we do. I know when they first started, some of them many, many years ago, when charter schools kind of first started, they did try to do that. They actually tried to pay certain types of teachers less. For example, PE, maybe they weren't a certified teacher. They'd use somebody from a gym. This is when it first started. I just remember because I've been here so long. But they would do that, but they started finding that the teachers that they did that, they would leave them the next year, so they then started kind of staying on our level or at least paying a little more. Because at one time, they did try to stay under us in certain categories, but found that that led to that the teacher stayed that 1 year, fulfilled their contract, and moved over to work for us, for the non-charter school side. So I don't see that anymore. I don't know exactly what every charter school does, especially the one that is, doesn't do through our payroll. But I sometimes see that some will pay things more, and they're allowed to do that. They don't have to follow guidelines like we do. That is part of why they're charter schools.
Well, I'm very interested in what the lore is. I always like to be friendly about our charter schools, but I always like to know the lore. And the flexibility is something they have. The selectivity that they choose students who they wish to have come, and those who get there and don't behave, we get our babies back. I just think, what can we do to mimic charter school success? What can we do to innovate our programs, but understand that we are going to deal with all children who are here, with special needs children who, so how do we compete with our charter schools so that we don't have so many kids wanting to leave to go to a charter school?
Is this one on? I do want to say the charter schools do have to serve special education students, and they have to serve them in accordance with federal law. We do partner with them in a way. Some students present exceptional challenges for their environment, but the rule is that they need to serve these students. I just want to be clear that they do serve them, and they are subject to the same federal laws we are in terms of special education, just for a point of clarity.
Okay.
Back to you, Ms. Cooley. I'm sure there'll be more questions at the end or comments.
Okay. On this next slide, I wanted to show the private school enrollment trend, which, as you can see, it really jumped up right after the pandemic. They were in a decline like we were for many years before the pandemic because of the birth rates. And then they jumped up a lot because they did have the in-school during some of the time when we were doing virtual. But as you can see, for fiscal year 25, they were on the upward trend through fiscal year 24, but this year they actually had a slight decrease also. So it's just the number of students has gone down. So you can't really look at it as we're losing or anything. I think it's just, there's just not as many children. So, and we are becoming an older population in Savannah, even though our numbers are growing. And then I know younger people are choosing not to have children. A lot of younger people are. That used not to be the norm during my time. Things have changed.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Private school trend, and I say this all the time, private schools target our prime athletes. They target them basically when they're in middle school. So when you look at the trend to see that whether or not they're increasing or decreasing, it'll be interesting to know whether or not it's increasing at that level of high school and middle school when they recruit the best of our athletes, the best of the best. And I typically say every year that Chatham County has more private schools than any county in the state of Georgia, over 30. Found that out when I was Title I program manager of private schools. So we're in competition with, private schools, home schools, charter schools, but I know that private schools do target our prime athletes, and it's really increasing in that area. So I would just I wonder, when you see the increase and decrease, where is it? Is it at the elementary level of private school or high school or middle school? Because that's when we look at our data, it appears that we are losing students in middle and high school as opposed to elementary. They're fine K through 5, but 6 through 12, that's when we see a significant difference.
That's a good point, and as you can see, because people are not having children, our numbers are going down in elementary, which used to be our big boost in the past, but since we have less children being born, we're not boosting up there. But as far as the numbers, I'll have to see if they've got them broken out with private schools, because it was just like a total from the thing that I pulled from I pulled it from our numbers, from the state numbers where it was recorded. I don't know if they have to do it by grade, but I can certainly check on that.
And can I ask this also? The FTE count, 10-day count at the beginning of the school year, I remember as a teacher, the new teachers were always nervous about that count. So although we won't lose teachers, are we seeing that a lot of them are being transferred to other schools? Because we may not lose them as a district, but many schools are a little nervous about losing those teachers due to that particular school's enrollment to another school.
It can happen at 10th day, and that's the thing. That's why I don't want to overinflate. That's why it's this fine line, because if a school, and where it tends to be that the schools that are growing are on the west side, because that's the new growth. And where we're hurting is actually the schools in Savannah. And so it's hard to just go, oh, we got to take all these people and put them over here. But I mean, some of the teachers do have to move. Now, they have a system for that, and it's usually, I believe, the least senior. So it's not like a teacher that's been there 20 years is one that's going to be moved. But now a lot of schools don't want to lose those, even that they just hired. So that can happen. That's why we have this fine line of getting it right, because it can, I think, anybody that's ever been at a school where it went down dramatically especially this can happen during a redistricting, because we try to figure it out, but people always end up changing a lot of addresses sometimes when you redistrict the thing. So like, for example, years ago, I remember Johnson High when it redistricted, and we had we had Islands High open. We reduced the number at Johnson, but we didn't, it ended up being way less. And it was when Mrs. Ball Oliver was at Johnson, and she knows what it was like to go through, because she had to lose so many teachers, and it was horrible. Because for one thing, the kids get started in their classes, they love their teachers, and then here we have to move them. So it is a fine line, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. But if a school loses an extensive number of students, we can't just leave these teachers there. It's not fair. The other schools need the teachers too. So, especially the ones that have grown. So we've tried to get that balance. So there is still schools that no teacher that, is going to lose their job because we don't have enough, but they could possibly have to move to another school site. And that does happen at the 10th day mark, and we start noticing, when we notice it's going in that trend, they start like letting them know, hey, it's looking, if you don't get these numbers, you're going to lose these teachers. We start about the 5th day or so. So schools are out sometimes making sure everybody gets back to school. They will knock on doors to bring the students and say, please come in. Now, we do have things in place that if the numbers go up after 10th day, there is parameters where they can gain teachers as the year goes on. That's happened this year at Pulaski, because they have a very fluctuating enrollment at the school because it's on the military base. So,
Ms. Hall, and then we're going to move on.
All right, I have a question for Dr. Watts. Thinking about technology, if I'm a 10th grade biology teacher and a school over here has 10 more kids, they want me to move, isn't it possible with the technology we have now that I can teach those children at that school from right where I am? There has to be some innovative things that we haven't started doing that we can begin to do.
There are very innovative things that I've seen implemented in other districts where you leverage technology. You would need to maybe pay that teacher more because the essence of their job changes significantly. You may have to at sometimes look at putting a paraprofessional in with the class that doesn't have the body. The body may be at another site, but you still need an adult in that classroom to facilitate learning. But there is definitely innovation that we need to look at, not just for that reason, but as the teaching profession continues to decline, we're going to have to explore ways to be
yeah.
innovative around how we make the teaching staff that we do have maximize across most
Yeah,
majority of kids.
I'd really like us to look at this positively rather than starting to, put our hair on fire about what to do.
On this next slide, I'm just trying to show the percentage of enrollment change in the public schools versus the private schools. And as you can see, this past year, we actually did slightly better in the percentage. And do want to point out that private schools are about 1/5 the size of our public schools. So it's not an apples to apples, it's more of an apples to oranges comparison. Enrollment trends and observations. Hoping this is a wrong. We have gone and projected 100 more, as I stated. Why? For next year. But in the future, to be realistic, I believe there will be a slight reduction. I hope that will end up being incorrect due to the industry, but I have to put forth what keeps showing us, and we haven't seen those children from these new sites that, from the Hyundai plants and stuff. So this is a projection. Hopefully it will not be accurate in the future. Hopefully more and more industry coming in, we'll see more and more students. And that concludes my presentation. If anybody has any questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And now for the real meat and potatoes. I'll bring Ms. Taylor up with our return on investment process, and she gave us a lovely thick spreadsheet of data, so we should all be super excited to digest that.
Good morning.
Morning.
Today's presentation is another clear example of our strategic plan in action. The return on investment ROI work that I'll share today is really rooted in our strategic plan and reflects the processes and updates. And you heard a little bit about the program inventory packet that you have, but this is an update since the last time we had a conversation. And our focus today will be on the program inventory, which is an important element of our efforts to ensure the district resources are aligned with our strategic priorities and deliver maximum impact. Of course, program inventory work is rooted in strategic priority 4, performance objective A, which focuses on conducting a comprehensive and objective evaluations to promote continuous improvement and district effectiveness. I'd like to talk a little bit very briefly about our approach and certainly want to highlight the efforts of all of our chiefs, their departments, as well as the work of our Director of Evaluation, Dr. Heather Colbert, leading and working hand in hand with the chiefs and their teams. And when you think about the broader process, we approach this through collaboration, partnership, prioritizing, and alignment. One of the things as part of our approach is we grounded ourselves and recalibrated around the definition of program, which is an intentional set of structured activities and strategies established to achieve outcomes and goals utilizing a significant amount of time, human capital, and financial resources. What I'd like to highlight is for this program inventory, we really leaned heavily on the financial resources portion. Though we know there's work we need to do around time and human capital, the program inventory really looked at the financial element of the specific programs. Also, just to note that this is an iterative process and it's ongoing and it will guide the work that we do around budget planning, starting with our decision matrix, which the leaders utilize to make decisions and evaluate programs. Some of the factors that they considered were alignment to strategic priorities and impact on student outcomes, as well as stakeholder support, which will allow us to now begin to have targeted evaluations and targeted ROIs, and we'll be prioritizing what we focus on based on what we've learned from the program evaluation. And eventually, where we want to get to throughout this process is we're finalizing our program evaluation guide, and then we'll be selecting programs that will actually undergo full program evaluations. Let's jump in. I heard meat and potatoes, so here we go. When you look at strategic priority alignment, this is what we learned, or this is what the program inventory told us. This is organized by strategic priority. So we looked at 96 programs. 41 of the programs were aligned to strategic priority 1 students. 5 were aligned to strategic priority 2 stakeholders, and 13 were aligned to strategic priority 3 employees, and 37 aligned with strategic priority 4, which is stewardship. In addition to looking at alignment by strategic priority, we also looked at the programs by investment level. And the way that we organized the investment level, we broke them down into low, moderate, high, and highest investment, and you'll see the numbers there, that there are 20 low investment programs. There are also 20 moderate investment programs, 19 high investment programs, and 37 highest investment programs. To take it a step further as it relates to investment, we looked specifically at general fund investments, recognizing that there are other programs that we are investing in, but they are not coming from our general fund. So we recognize that our special revenue resources also fund some of our programming, but for this conversation, we just looked at general fund investment. And here you'll see before you how we're investing not only by strategic priority, but also the amount of money that is being invested from the general fund as it relates to programming for each specific strategic priority. So how does this really help us move forward or advance? The program inventory work influences how we approach district investments, specifically using the program inventory to really guide what's working, who it's working for, and at what cost is that particular program having on the district, which eventually informs our annual budget or our budget planning process. I mentioned early on that the team used a decision-making matrix. Though I won't go into detail around the matrix, I do want to share the categories that we looked at, which are strategic alignment, educational impact, stakeholder engagement, employee engagement and support, as well as fiscal responsibility. This tool was used to allow us to evaluate the programs. Though we are working toward a more empirical system, we needed a starting point, and we recognize that discernment is part of this process, but I'll talk a little bit more as I wrap up about where we want to go, but this was our on-ramp to our ROI work. After we went through the matrix, this is what we came up with or what we learned about where our programming is. So we looked at what programs should we consider continuing, what programs should we approach with caution, so what are programs that we might want to take a closer look at, and then potentially what programs might we want to consider stopping. Again, of the 96 programs that we reviewed, 43 were categorized as caution and 5 were identified as stop. I want to again underscore that this was an initial review, and it highlighted that many programs lacked metrics and outcomes, underscoring the need for us to have a deeper dive. So I can't stress enough that this is an on-ramp. We have to get started, and we're excited to partner with our friends and colleagues in finance to now, as part of our budget process, collect information on what intended outcomes are and what metrics we will be looking at, so as we do the next iteration, we can have a more data-driven approach. I will quickly hit again. I think I've brought the point home, but again, this approach, though we did have a matrix, was influenced by discernment, and our ongoing refinement is critical so that we establish a robust, quantitative, data-driven process, enabling us to make informed decisions on which programs we stop, start, or continue, so that we can ensure that we align our district's investments with our strategic priorities, and most importantly, optimize the resources that we're charged with being stewards over. As it relates to next steps, we are beginning the process now to have conversations about which programs we do need to take a deeper analysis into and have more targeted ROIs, and which programs should we consider for full program evaluations. We're continuing to build our muscle and capacity around program evaluation, specifically ROI throughout the district. Currently, it is something that our central office team has been doing. We do look eventually to begin to have conversations more broadly, but right now we want to continue building that capacity and muscle. And then what we're most excited about is this process is informing or helping guide our budget planning for fiscal year 26. I will pause there to see if you have any questions or anything I might be able to provide clarity around.
And I'm going to thank you again, Ms. Taylor. I grabbed her before the meeting, and she was already worried. You were a little, it's like, what you got? This is the beginning of, like, I would
Absolutely.
think everybody from finance and academic affairs and probably the cabinet on really having like a laundry list of everything we do. What does it connect to? And this year, we don't have all the beautiful numbers, okay, to just have I envision instead of notes, it'll be ROI. And I mean, for us simple people, you can make it red, green, and yellow, but I'm sure you'll have some data points there as well. And I could see a year, definitely 2 from now, that the board might not even have to have real big discussions on what do we keep, what do we get rid of, because the district is going to make such a great pitch on, we thought it was wrong, gone. Or this is working, we got to move money here. And it won't be a how do we feel. Right. I love that we already have this, what did you say, 97? I mean,
96.
96, yeah. It's January, and we're already talking about programming. And maybe we don't have the ROI or some massive data metric, but we have the people that are in the trenches every day that understand it to some degree and can have that discernment. And I, as Brinkman, trust that discernment on what you've already said is a stop. And that caution is a huge number. And I'm sure some of those are going to move to a stop or a simmer. We're going to put less into that. And we're already doing that in January. So that I know is going to make this budget process so much more driven to what are we actually going to invest in. I think it also tells all the leads that anything they've got money going into that's an annual recurring contract, they better have talking points so that in future finance committee meetings, when we have this inventory, we're going to be like, so who's in charge of this? We need them here next meeting to give us a State of the Union on this program before we vote on it for a reoccurring contract. That's where I see this going. It makes me happy. I think it should make our taxpayers immensely happy because this is the most transparency I've had in 6 years on all of these programs. You can talk to the people that are working with them and they like them and things like that, but we really have got to get down to, is it doing what we want it to do? And when you really dig through this, I've spent way too long because I got here super early. There's a lot of stuff here that's just infrastructure behind the scenes that we're still calling to accountability so that we don't keep running with the same print shop that we ran with for forever and a day. So I just love that we are taking the microscope to it. This isn't even a looking glass. This is a microscope and getting really down and I'm sure for y'all dirty through some stuff, okay? And it's gonna take a lot of work before it takes less work. But I think in the future, it should take less work, I hope, because it'll be something that's always monitored.
Yep.
And for the future for our taxpayers, having this as a living document where somebody can go in after they hear a meeting where we're talking about something and they can see what it does, they can see what it costs. I love that you've broken this down to see what it costs per student, see what it costs per staff. And then in the future, we're going to have, and this is what that actually does for our students. This is what that actually does for our district, and it's doing it at a score. So thank you so much. I'll let Ms. Hall speak now.
Mine is very quick. I don't know if you were at our ceremony Friday, but this is what I was trying to say to the public. We are data-driven. So this kind of just validates everything I was saying. And I really look forward to The arguments we'll have are, well, should that be cautionary or should it be gone? That's going to be fun to really look through. But thank you so much for setting this up like this. I appreciate it.
Moss?
This is so exciting. This is fantastic. One of the things, that you hear from the public is what is the return on investment? So I am so glad that we're doing this. I want to stress how important it is that we communicate this to the public, that we are doing this. And when we come up with these evaluations, our communications department is out there letting the public know we're looking at this. We're not just spending your money. We're conscious about where we spend your money, and there are some things that we may not spend your money on anymore because they don't work. So thank you so much. This is amazing.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. And we all know that with Title I, it's not a program, but it's a grant. However, who's holding who accountable to ensure that those resources are aligned? Because we receive millions of dollars every year in Title I, and it pours into many of our Title I schools. But we want to make sure that we see an investment, the resources that are being poured out. So it's never really mentioned when we talk about the budget. It's pretty much, it hones in on state funding, but there is a really significant amount of federal funding that we receive. So can you expound on the federal funding or?
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr.
So
Watts.
what you're saying is where I'm going next, because not only do we have a significant amount of money and investment through federal Title I, we also through special ed. And so this is to get us started, and then we will eventually build this out across other grant-funded programs. But we had to build a muscle first, but we're going there. We need to look at every cent that comes into our district through a scrutinized methodology.
I don't think now is the time for us to nitpick this unless a board member has something real specific to ask. I would ask the board members here and the board members that are not here that I know are going to watch this to actually start developing and sending those questions on, like, can we talk about, and we cannot, please, board members, a laundry list of all 96, but the ones that you think that your eyes get pulled to, and send that to the people that are in charge of this so that they, in February, March, April, can start bringing, I think I would like this as a recurring portion of the agenda for the months leading up, that we're going to look at these ones because board members have brought them up, or district staff that are smarter than us go, these are the ones we need to explain to you why it's a big number, but we're keeping it, or it's a big number, we're getting rid of it. And here's how we're managing that moving forward. So board members, the things that you think draw your eyes, that you want more information on, I've already had my talk with Ms. Taylor earlier. I don't know. I wasn't going to name her. I was looking at three people because their names are all on the front of that on the front of that PowerPoint. But how might the district want that?
It could be any of us if you have questions.
Okay, so Ms. Taylor, Dr. Corbett, or Dr. Watts?
Yes.
Am I saying that right? Corbett? Corbett.
Yes, and we'll direct them to the appropriate person. If I may, I just want to add, and I mentioned it before, but this was definitely, and I talked about an example of strategic plan in action, but it's also an example of how the teams are working cross-collaboratively, because this was not the effort, though Dr. Colbert really worked closely with them, and I helped kind of cohere things. Dr. May was involved, and more importantly, every chief, every department, and we are excited, I will say, to have had the chance to sit knee to knee with every single chief and many of their executive directors to come up with this. So the conversations weren't had in isolation, and I just want to thank the team for the work that they did to get us to this point, and we're looking forward to where we'll go.
Are there any other, from this presentation, board comments, questions, things you want to
I just want to know
discuss
from Dr.
finance-wise?
Watts, will we be visiting this at the retreat? Will this kind of be a nice chunk of our days?
The budget development will be a significant chunk of our retreat. I think this document will be revisited throughout our budget development process.
Okay.
I will make this available to board members in my next bi-monthly update electronically, so you have it as well. But yes, the exciting thing for me is you're getting it in January. Next year, we'll be able to start the conversation even earlier because we've built the muscle, and we'll be able to have this even earlier.
Thank you all.
When are we going to hear from Dr. Vaughn?
That's informal.
Oh, okay. I thought we were missing out on it. Okay.
Do I have any other comments, concerns, questions from board members present? Any wisdom from the audience? I will adjourn. Our next meeting is February 19th. Hope everybody will be back then, and we'll talk about some more ROI, definitely. Thank you, and have a great day. We'll be back at 11 for informal.